Hi everyone, I'm Helen from Susan's family. Today, I'd like to bring you the Jade Aura cardigan from Chinese Aesthetics series. For this electronic tutorial, you can search for susodiy.com on the website to view it. The cardigan comes in two sizes, small and large. The making method is identical, only the stitch and row counts in some sections are slightly different. It is divided into the front piece, the back piece, the sleeves, sewing together, the collar and buttons. First, knit the front piece, the back piece, and the sleeves separately. After they are completed, sew the shoulder and body areas of the front and back pieces together. Then sew the sleeves. Finally, pick up the corresponding position to knit the collar. Then sew on the buttons. Let's start by knitting the back piece. It is divided into four areas: the hem, the body, the armpit, and the shoulder parts. Knit from the bottom upward sequentially. Start with the hem. Use the cable cast-on method. Knit back and forth in rows. Begin with a few rows of stocking stitch pattern. For the area afterward, knit in 1 times 1 ribbing pattern. That is, alternate between 1 purl stitch and 1 knit stitch. Below, I will demonstrate the cast-on method, the stocking stitch method, and the 1 times 1 ribbing method. You can learn these first, then combine them with the chart for knitting later. Please watch the demonstration. The cardigan actually uses 2 types of yarn. Take 1 strand of each yarn, then treat the 2 strands as one to knit with. The tutorial uses 1 strand of cotton yarn for clearer demonstration. In the following tutorial, 1 strand represents 2 actual strands. First, take the corresponding yarn. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Unless there are special circumstances, leave about 10 centimeters at the start. This makes it easier to weave in the ends later. Hold a straight needle in your left hand, or one end of a circular needle. Insert into the loop. Slightly tighten. This is the first stitch. Hold the other straight needle with your right hand in a pencil grip, or the other end of the circular needle. Wrap the yarn around your right pinky once. Gently pinch the yarn with your ring finger and middle finger. Keep this strand of yarn between your index finger and middle finger. This is the basic posture for knitting. After the first stitch is cast on, place the right needle above the yarn. Insert from front to back into the loop on the left needle. Let the right index finger carry the yarn. Yarn over and pull it through. Slip it onto the left needle. Don't pull the yarn too tight. Otherwise, it will be difficult to pick up stitches later. This is the second stitch. Continue casting on. Place the right needle above the yarn again. Insert from front to back between these 2 stitches. Yarn over. Draw through. Slip it onto the left needle. This is the third stitch. Pay attention, don't pull the yarn too tight. Continue casting on. Insert into between the loops. Yarn over and draw through. This is the fourth stitch. Every time you insert, it's between two loops. Continue with cable casting on. Stop when you've reached the required number of stitches. This is the method for cable casting on. Now continue with row 1. The stitch count is not important here. The focus is on explaining the method. Take out the corresponding yarn. I'll demonstrate here using cotton yarn. Make a slip knit with the yarn. Slightly tighten the loop. Then insert from left to right into the first loop like this. Note: it's the end with the knot. Pull out the new yarn loop. Release the first loop. This is equivalent to knitting one knit stitch. Continue with another knit stitch. Insert from left to right through the loop. Yarn over. Draw through. The second knit stitch is completed. Continue knitting one by one accordingly. After finishing the knit stitches, the bottom part here is the braid. Since this is the cast-on stitches, it's a bit loose, it might not be very noticeable. Finish knitting this row. Now my first row is done. We will consider the side facing us now as the right side of the fabric. This is the side with the knot at the bottom right corner. Continue to knit the second row, turn the work. We will work this row on the wrong side. Refer to the chart from left to right. Pay attention. The chart shows the texture of the right side of the fabric. On the wrong side, you need to knit for the purl stitch key, and purl for the knit stitch key. You can notice that this row on the chart is all knit stitches, so on the wrong side, we will work all purl stitches. Start with the first stitch. Place the yarn above the right needle. Insert into the loop from right to left. Yarn over. Draw through. Release the loop. One purl stitch is done. Continue with the second purl stitch. Keep the yarn above. Insert into the loop from right to left. Yarn over. Draw through. The second purl stitch is complete. After finishing the purl stitches, the bottom will show horizontal line texture. You can flip to the right side to check. On the right side, it's the texture of knit stitch braids. Continue to work purl stitches correspondingly. Finish this row. Now the second row is done. The stocking stitch pattern means knitting all stitches on the right side, and purling all stitches on the wrong side. I'll demonstrate 2 more rows. Continue with the third row. Work this row on the right side. Knit 1 by 1 accordingly. After completing it, continue with the fourth row, turn to the wrong side, work purl stitches correspondingly. Now I've finished the first 4 rows. When counting the rows, you can count like this. A column of V-shaped braids. Note: the braids for casting on don't count. One, 2, 3. Plus the loops on the needle count as 1 row. So here we have completed 4 rows. Everyone, continue to refer to the chart, and finish the remaining rows. Before knitting stitches, place the yarn under the right needle. That is, at the back. Then insert the right needle from left to right, into the first loop. Pay attention, not between 2 loops. Yarn over and draw through. At the same time, release the loop from the left needle. 1 knit stitch is completed. The second stitch is a horizontal symbol, which represents a purl stitch. Note: when alternating between knit and purl stitches, you need to bring the yarn to the corresponding position before working. Therefore, before purling, bring the yarn to the front first, then do the purl stitch. Insert the right needle from right to left, into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. At the same time, release the loop from the left needle. 1 purl stitch is completed. The third stitch is a knit stitch again. Before doing the knit stitch, you need to bring the yarn to the back first. Then insert from left to right into the loop. Yarn over. Draw through. Another knit stitch is done. You can notice that, after completing the knit stitch, the side facing yourself, a braid-like texture forms on the bottom. When you look at the other side, there is a horizontal line below. The fourth stitch is a purl stitch. The yarn needs to be placed in front of the needle. Insert from right to left into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. Another purl stitch is done. You can see that, after completing the purl stitch, on the side facing you, there is a horizontal line below the loop. When viewed from the other side, there is a braid below the loop. Following this pattern, continue to alternate one knit stitch and one purl stitch. For the last few stitches, refer to the chart for knitting. Finish the first row, due to the casting on method. If the first row of knit stitches is a bit difficult, you can also insert the needle from the back of the loop to make the knit stitch like this. Now, the first row of the sample swatch is complete. If you're not quite sure how to count rows, after finishing the first row, you can place a mark on any braid on the right side. This makes counting rows easier. When you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a safety pin or paperclip as a substitute. This also serves as a mark on the right side. Now proceed to work the second row. The second row is worked on the wrong side. Refer to the chart from left to right, and knit for the purl stitch key, and purl for the knit stitch key. That means knit stitch keys are worked as purl stitches, and purl stitch keys are worked as knit stitches. The sample chart starts with one knit stitch key, so I'll work one purl stitch. Mindful, when working a purl stitch, make sure to place the yarn in front of the needle first. Next is one purl stitch key, so work one knit stitch. You can also follow the texture. If you see horizontal bars on the bottom for a purl stitch texture, work one purl stitch. If you see braids for a knit stitch texture, work one knit stitch. Horizontal lines mean purl stitches. Braids for knit stitches. Continue to follow the texture while knitting. Finish the second row. This way, the second row is completed. Now move on to the third row. Similarly, you can work according to the texture below. If the edge stitch texture is unclear, refer to the chart for guidance. Then continue with the same stitch techniques as the texture below. Horizontal lines, purl stitch, braid, knit stitch. Continue to finish this row. For the last stitch, you can follow the chart. For each subsequent row, regardless of right side or wrong side, you can work according to the texture below. If you see horizontal lines below, then work the purl stitch. If you see a braid below, then work the knit stitch. This is the method for 1 times 1 ribbing stitch. The sample here has a few rows of 1 times 1 ribbing already worked. We can count the row numbers. The loop with the stitch marker is from the cast on. Let's start from the braid above. Count upwards. 1 braid equals 1 row. Here there are 5 braids. Plus the loops on the needle. That also counts as 1 row. Therefore, we have worked a total of 6 rows here. This is the method to count rows for 1 times 1 ribbing stitch. Now the hem section has been explained. Next, work the body section. It's all stocking stitch. Everyone can refer to the chart and complete this section. After completing, work the armpit area. Still work in stocking stitch pattern. Just remember to bind off stitches on both sides for the first few rows. Work the remaining rows even after completion. Let me demonstrate the method of decreasing stitches for the underarm. Everyone please learn it first, and then follow the chart to work. Please watch the demonstration. I will explain the method using this small swatch. At the beginning of row 1, bind off several stitches in a row. Refer to the chart for the exact number of stitches. The number of bind off symbols indicates how many stitches to bind off. If there are several bind off keys, it means you need to bind off that many stitches. In my case, I need to bind off 4 stitches in a row. If there are many consecutive stitches to bind off, we can use stitch markers to separate them beforehand. Start binding off the stitches. The first stitch can be worked as a slip stitch, or you can work it as a knit stitch. Here, I will work it as a slip stitch. Then work 1 knit stitch. Then pass the first stitch over the second stitch. That's how you bind off 1 stitch. Unless otherwise specified, on the right side, you bind off stitches knitwise. Continue with 1 more knit stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Keep binding off stitches knitwise. Keep going until there is only 1 loop left on the right side of the marker. In my case, I have 2 loops left. We need to bind off 1 more stitch. Now there is only 1 loop remaining on the right side of the marker. This is the loop from the 4th stitch. We need to bind this stitch off as well. So, work 1 more stitch and bind it off. The next stitch that follows will be the adjacent stitch of the final bind off key. We will simply knit it. Note: because the stitch technique may vary depending on the pattern, you need to refer to the chart for this stitch. After finishing it, bind off the 4th stitch as well. This way, all 4 stitches in the chart will have been bound off. Continue following the chart for the rest of the work, mindful that, next, you should start knitting from the second stitch next to the bind off key. Before you start, slightly tighten the loop gently to prevent any noticeable holes. There are no special patterns here, so we will work all stitches as knit stitches. Finish this row. Now, we've completed the first row. Continue with the second row. We will work this row on the wrong side. At the beginning, you also need to bind off 4 stitches in a row. Separate them with a stitch marker first. Start binding off. Similarly, you can work the first stitch as a slip stitch, or you can do a purl stitch. Here, I'll do a slip stitch. Then do another purl stitch. Next, pass the first stitch over the second one. This way, you've bound off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 more purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. When there are no special instructions on the wrong side, you just bind off purlwise. Keep purling and binding off simultaneously. Keep going until there's only 1 stitch left to the right of the marker. Here, let's bind off 1 more stitch. Now there's only 1 stitch left to the right of the marker. That is, only the 4th stitch loop remains. Bind off this last stitch as well. Therefore, you need to work 1 more stitch and bind it off the next stitch, which is the one adjacent to the last bind off key. On the wrong side, we will purl this stitch. Bind off the 4th stitch. In actual working, the specific stitch technique for this stitch should be followed according to the chart. This way, the 4 stitches from the chart are now bound off. Continue to knit by referring to the chart. Pay attention. The next step should start knitting from the second stitch next to this bind off key. Before knitting, slightly tighten this loop. To prevent any noticeable holes. There are no special patterns here, so we will purl all stitches. Now, the second row is explained. Next, bind off on the right side. The method is identical to the one used here in the first row. Bind off on the wrong side. The method is the same as the one used here in the second row. I'll demonstrate 2 more rows. Continue with the third row. At the beginning of this row, you need to bind off 2 stitches. First, bind off 1 stitch. On the right side, bind off knitwise. Then knit one more stitch and bind it off. Note: when binding off the last stitch, this stitch you're working on should be done according to the chart. Sometimes the pattern is special, so it might not necessarily be a knit stitch here. Everyone, please don't make a mistake. It's the same for the wrong side. Now I've bound off 2 stitches. Continue knitting to finish this row. After completing it, continue with the 4th row. At the beginning of this row, bind off 2 stitches. First, bind off 1 stitch. On the wrong side, bind off purlwise. Then purl 1 stitch and bind it off. That way, you've bound off 2 stitches. Continue working to finish the row. Now I've completed the 4th row. If you only need to bind off 1 stitch on each side, the method is identical to the one used for binding off the first stitch earlier. This is the method for binding off stitches under the arm. That concludes the explanation of the armpit area. Next, I'll explain the shoulder part area. Both sides of the shoulders require short rows to form a sloping shoulder. In the center, bind off stitches to shape the neck opening. The method here is the same as the decrease used under the arm. Next, I will mainly explain the technique for short rows. Here, I'm demonstrating with a small swatch. First, follow the chart and knit until you reach the position where only a few stitches remain for your size. When you reach the corresponding position, leave the remaining stitches unworked. Continue with the 2nd row. Turn over. Then, work a double stitch. Slip the first stitch purlwise from back to front without working it. Then pull the yarn tight. A knot with 2 loops will appear on the right needle. This is the double stitch. If you're not sure where the first stitch is, you can place a mark on this slip stitch. If you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a safety pin or paperclip instead. Then, refer to the chart and continue knitting. Pay attention, on this row, the small size needs to be divided into left and right shoulder parts for separate knitting. In the middle, you will need to bind off stitches. For the large size, just knit the corresponding stitches directly. Here, I will continue with the demonstration using the large size as an example. Keep knitting until you reach the position where the corresponding number of stitches remain. After completion, leave the remaining stitches unknitted. Row 2 is completed. Continue with row 3. Start by making a double stitch. Similarly, slip the first stitch purlwise from back to front without knitting it. Pull the yarn tight backward. Finish the double stitch. Continue knitting afterward. Similarly, leave the corresponding number of stitches at the end of this row unknitted. After completion, everyone proceed with the method used in the first 2 rows. Continue knitting the remaining rows. When you reach the last row, while knitting back on the right side, you need to work the purl stitch. Start by binding off 2 stitches first. Then continue working according to the chart. When you encounter a double stitch, insert it through these 2 loops of the double stitch. Work 1 purl stitch. Then continue with this method. Finish knitting the remaining part. After completing all the knitting, you need to place the stitches on hold. I will demonstrate the method for placing stitches on hold next. Please watch the demonstration. Next, I'll demonstrate the method for placing stitches on hold. After finishing one side, transfer the loops to a separate straight needle or circular needle. You can also thread them together with yarn. When knitting later, transfer it back to the straight needle. Thread from right to left. This completes placing the stitches on hold. At this point, the explanation for the right side shoulder part is finished. For the left side shoulder part, refer to the chart and knit accordingly. With that, the explanation for the back piece's shoulder part is complete. Next, I will explain the front piece. They are divided into the left front piece and the right front piece. The left and right on the charts refer to the actual wearing position. Each front piece is further divided into the hem, the body, armpit, and shoulder parts. Likewise, knit them in sequence one by one. Start with the left front piece first. Let me explain the hem first. The technique here is completely identical to that of the back piece. After finishing a few rows of stocking stitch pattern, you need to increase stitches at the 1×1 ribbing pattern section. Here, we will use the M1P stitch. I'll demonstrate the newly used stitch technique next. You can all learn this first, and then knit by referring to the cart later. Please watch the demonstration. I will demonstrate the way of doing a M1P stitch. Pick up the strand with the left needle from back to front. And then simply work 1 purl stitch like this. Let me demonstrate it again. The left needle picks up the carried yarn like this. The right needle inserts into the yarn loop in front. And then you just need to work 1 purl stitch. That concludes the explanation of the hem area. Next, we will move on to knitting the body section. Here, you need to knit a pattern. I'll demonstrate the method using a swatch. First, work row 1. Begin by referring to the chart. Knit the corresponding number of knit and purl stitches. Continue until you reach the position before the K2 tog in the upper left corner of the chart. I have now reached the corresponding position here. Continue knitting with the K2 tog. After completing, continue with 1 knit stitch. Then work 1 yarn over stitch. Next, knit 1 stitch. 1 yarn over stitch. Then continue with 1 knit stitch. Following this is SKP. Knit accordingly. After finishing, continue with 5 knit stitches. Two purl stitches. Then work 1 yarn over stitch. Then continue knitting while referring to the cart. Keep knitting until you reach the position just before the 2/1 RC stitch as shown in the chart. When you reach the corresponding position, start knitting the 2/1 RC stitch. This indicates a cross of 2 stitches over 1 stitch, where the 2 stitches on the left are on top. First, switch the positions of the 3 loops on the left needle. Move these 3 stitches to the right needle. Then pick up the first loop from behind with the left needle. Release the loops on the right needle. Then slip the remaining 2 loops back onto the left needle. This way, the loops are now in the corresponding position. Next, knit the corresponding stitches. This completes the 2/1 RC stitch. You can take a look at the texture now. The loops of the 2 stitches on the left should be on top. Continue knitting afterward while referring to the chart to finish this row. With this, the method for row 1 is now explained. Continue knitting row 2. Start by referring to the chart. Keep knitting until right before the decrease position. You'll arrive at the corresponding position. Here, the chart shows a K2 tog stitch. On the wrong side, you need to work the K2 tog stitch purlwise. After completing it, continue with 2 purl stitches. Then 1 knit stitch, followed by 2 purl stitches. The next part of the chart shows a SKP stitch. Again, work on the wrong side. That is, work SKP stitch purlwise. After completing it, continue following the chart for the next part. Once you finish the last stitch, the method for row 2 has been fully explained. For the remaining rows, no new stitch techniques or methods are introduced. Everyone can just follow the chart to knit. Note that there are many yarn over stitches in this pattern. Be mindful to check the stitch count after finishing a section, and promptly verify the number of stitches. This will prevent extra or missing stitches. This concludes the explanation of the body section. Next, we'll cover the armpit and shoulder parts areas. Here, stitches are only bound off on one side for the armpit. The pattern area continues to be knitted with the established pattern. For the shoulder parts, stitches also need to be bound off on one side. The final few rows of the shoulders require short rows. Short rows are only done on one side here. The method is identical to that of the back piece. After completion, you will need to join and bind off the stitches together. Let me demonstrate the technique for joining and binding off next. Please watch the demonstration. The first type is stitch-to-stitch joining. This occurs when both sides are in loop form. It's a commonly used joining method. It involves binding off to join the pieces together. This is typically used for attaching the shoulders of front and back pieces. Both fabric pieces are in a loop state. We'll consider the stockinette stitch side as the right side. Joining and binding off usually happens on the wrong side of the fabric. This means you need to place the two pieces with their right sides facing each other. Usually, one of the pieces has yarn that isn't cut. No matter which piece the yarn is on, place the side with the yarn tail on the right. When doing the joining and bind off together, it's all about binding off knitwise. That is, pass through loops from both fabric pieces simultaneously. Bind them off knitwise. The stitch count of the two pieces is usually identical. Simply knit into each stitch in sequence and bind off. If one piece has more stitches, you need to decrease while binding off on the side with more stitches. Let's say this piece has more stitches. You can insert into two loops at once. Then continue by inserting into one loop. Bind off the stitch knitwise. If the other piece has more stitches, insert into two loops from that piece at once. Bind off the stitch knitwise. In my case, both pieces have the same number of stitches. Continue binding off until finished. Tie off and hide the yarn tail. This is what it looks like after joining and binding off the stitches together. That concludes the explanation of the left front piece. Next, we'll knit the right front piece. The method is similar to that of the left front piece. You need to increase stitches in certain areas of the 1x1 ribbing hem section. The body section requires you to knit the pattern. There's also a new crossing stitch technique introduced here. It's a 2/1 LC stitch. I'll demonstrate the technique for this crossing stitch separately. Once again, I'll use a small sample to demonstrate. The 2 stitches on the right will be on top. First, switch the position of the 3 loops on the left needle. Move them to the right needle first. Then pick up the first 2 stitches from the front with the left needle. Release the loops on the right needle. Slip the remaining 1 loop back onto the left needle. Then knit the stitches in order. This completes the 2/1 LC stitch. The loops of the 2 stitches on the right will be on top. That concludes the explanation for the body section. Next, we'll work on the armpit and shoulder parts areas. For the armpit, you decrease stitches on one side. For the shoulder parts, you decrease stitches symmetrically on the other side. The shoulders require short rows for shaping. After completion, join and bind off together with the back piece. You can finish the remaining part by following the chart. That completes the explanation for the right front piece. Next, we'll move on to the sleeves. There are 2 in total. The method is the same for both. Each sleeve is divided into 2 sections, the sleeve body and the sleeve cap. Start by casting on with the cable cast on method. Then work the sleeve body back and forth. The edges of the fabric will have stocking stitch pattern. You need to knit the pattern in the centered position. After completion, continue working on the sleeve cap. Decrease stitches on both sides as needed. Once everything is finished, bind off the stitches. Let me demonstrate the method for binding off stitches at the end. Everyone can learn this first. Please watch the demonstration. Bind off knitwise. Usually after you finish knitting the stocking stitch. You can use this method on the right side. When binding off in this situation, knit 2 stitches first. Then pick up the first stitch with the left needle. And let it cover the second stitch. That's how you bind off 1 stitch. Continue with 1 more knit stitch. Then pick up the first stitch with the left needle. And let it cover the second stitch. That's how you bind off another stitch. I'll continue binding them off. Each time, you bind off knitwise. Now there is only 1 loop left. Stretch the loop. Then leave a tail and fasten off. The yarn tail length depends on the specific situation of the fabric. Usually, reserving about 10 centimeters is enough. Pass the yarn tail through the loop. Pull tight. This is the method for binding off knitwise. Regardless of the binding off method you use, the way to secure the yarn tail at the end can refer to the demonstration here, and after everything is completely finished, if you're not reserving a long yarn tail for sewing. These short yarn tails can be woven in on the wrong side following the fabric texture. Try not to affect the right side texture. When weaving in the yarn tail, you can weave in the entire yarn tail. This completes the explanation of the sleeve knitting. Next, I will explain how to sew together the front and back body sections. Align the two fabric pieces with the right sides facing up. Then take a piece of yarn, pick up the edge and insert the needle. Next, in the inner side of one stitch on the edge. Pick up 2 horizontal bars. Insert the needle sequentially. After sewing a few stitches, pull tight slightly. Pay attention not to pull too tight. Keep the fabric flat. Continue sewing using this method. Check as you sew. The textures on both sides should roughly match. You can use stitch markers to mark a few roughly corresponding points. Between the marked points, sew evenly. If the yarn runs out, you can tie a knot and join yarn on the wrong side. After completing, bring the yarn to the wrong side. If the remaining yarn is long enough, you don't need to cut it. You can continue sewing the sleeves later. This concludes the explanation of sewing the body sections of the front and back pieces. Next, I'll explain how to sew the sleeves. The method is the same. First, take the two sides of the sleeve. Sew together the corresponding horizontal bars on the inner side of the edge stitch. Then match the ending position of sewing the sleeve body with the ending position of sewing the body section. The center of the pattern on top should correspond to the shoulder seam of the front and back pieces. To sew evenly, you can mark a few roughly corresponding points. Here, we use the stitch to row sewing method to sew. Next, I'll provide a sewing method for your reference. Everyone can learn it first. Please watch the demonstration. If the stitches are bound off, they need to be sewn together with the rows. On the stitches side, pick up the reversed braid. On the row side, pick up the horizontal carried yarn. And if the row numbers are more than the stitches, then according to the situation, at the appropriate position, pick up 2 horizontal carried yarns at the same time. If you don't need to sew a braid effect, just tighten the yarn. That's the end of the explanation for sewing the sleeves. Next, we'll knit the collar. Pick up stitches along the neckline area of the front and back pieces, then knit back and forth. When picking up stitches here, pick up 1-2 strands from the edge of the fabric. Start from the top of the right front piece and pick up stitches from right to left. Refer to the schematic diagram for the number of stitches to pick up in each area. After completing this, knit the 1x1 ribbing pattern. At both ends of some rows, you need to knit 3 stitches together. After finishing the knitting, you'll need to bind off stitches. 2 new stitch techniques are used here. SK2 tog O stitch and K3 tog stitch. I will explain the knitting of these 2 new stitches separately next. Everyone can learn this first, and then combine it with the chart for knitting. Please watch the demonstration. First, let me explain the SK2 tog O stitch. Slip the loop from the left needle without knitting. Then use the right needle to knit the next 2 loops on the left needle. By going through both of them knitwise, knit 1 stitch. Then take the loop that was slipped earlier and pass it over the next loop. This completes the 3 stitches on the SK2 tog O stitch. Next, let me explain the K3 tog stitch. Directly insert through next 3 loops on the left needle knitwise. Knit 1 stitch. This completes the K3 tog stitch. That concludes the explanation of the collar section. Next, I will explain the buttons. Start with the creation and attachment of the buttonholes. First, crochet the buttonhole. Start by leaving a long yarn tail. Hold the yarn with your left hand. Begin with a foundation chain. Then crochet 25 chain stitches. Or crochet until it's about 7-8 centimeters long. After completing, pick the position of the first chain stitch. Pick one strand on the outside of the braid. Work one slip stitch to secure it. Leave a long yarn tail and break the yarn. That completes one buttonhole. Next, proceed with attaching. Attach it on the wrong side of the two front pieces. At the chain stitch position counted from the edge inward on the 4th row. The specific position can also be adjusted according to your preference. After confirming the position, start sewing. Use the long yarn tail that was reserved here. Sew a few stitches at the tail end to secure it. There's no specific requirement for the method, as long as it's secure. After completing, tie the two yarn tails in a double knot to secure. Hide the remaining yarn tails along the fabric texture on the wrong side. This completes the attachment of the buttonholes. Finally, on the right side of the front piece, at a position that roughly corresponds to where the buttonholes are attached, attach the buttons. Both front pieces need to have buttons attached. After completing, interlace the buttonholes. And fasten them onto the corresponding buttons. That concludes the explanation of the button section. Up to this point, the entire cardigan knitting process has now been fully explained. If you have any questions during the process, don't hesitate to reach us via our website, Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.